Кирилл Игоревич, слышите меня?
Да, да, слышу, слышу.
Вы не могли бы повернуть камеру, перпендикулярно, потому что вы сейчас у нас отражаетесь параллельно.
Вот так.
Да.
Мгм.
Спасибо.
Так, сейчас немножко отодвину. Ага. Так. Мгм. Ну ладно. Мгм.
Hello.
Hello, nice to meet you. I'm fine, thank you. I'm Valentin, I'm from Vienna. I'm one of Professor Brandstedter's students.
Okay, very nice. But where's the professor himself?
I'm not sure, I don't know. But I think he will make it. I'm sure he will make it.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Rashad. Hi, all my dear colleagues and friends. Good to see the well-known faces. I'm here. Yeah.
Maybe you introduce who is from your side. You, Valentin, he told now, and we are waiting for professor.
Yeah, I guess so. Usually he should show up. I have no other news, so I guess he will be there soon. Just a second.
And also, I don't see the Azerbaijan part.
Yeah.
Rafat is there.
But where's Rafat?
Good day, colleagues. I'm here. Hello.
Rafat took glasses. That's why I could not recognize my own sound, Georg. So, Georg, let's first I introduce the Russian side.
Should I check if Wolfgang is doing fine and joining us? Let's give us. I give him a phone call. Just give me a few seconds. Yeah, let's wait a minute. Just to try to call him on the phone.
Okay. Так, российская часть. У нас Мехти, ты с докладом или будешь только это делать? Привет.
Да, с докладом, здравствуйте.
Доклад. Лимит 3 минуты, да, я говорил. Игорь Шулятев, вы как?
Ну, у меня на 3 минуты будет короткое сообщение по международным отношениям.
В дискуссии поучаствуем.
Да, только у меня не очень хороший звук, я не знаю, как у вас, но у меня иногда пропадает и ребит звук. Я не знаю, может, в процессе будет нормально все.
Это зависит от администратора или как, Руслан?
Нет, это зависит от того...
От провайдера, да?
Соединения, да.
Ну, значит, тогда будем думать. Значит, у нас получается Мехти раз выступление, Игорь 2, ну, 3-минутное.
У меня 3.
Анатолий, вы?
Да, я с выступлением, да, на 3.
3 человека. Руслан.
Ну, у меня не выступление, но некие мысли есть на 3 минуты.
Значит, в процессе. Valentin, sorry, you also give us some report, yes, for 3-4 minutes, or not?
Wolfgang, Professor Brandstetter told me I should just join you for today and maybe introduce myself a little bit. Or just...
as you wish. I only want to understand how many people will take a speech. Кирилл, как у тебя?
Yes, the same. I have a 3 minutes report, so no problem.
Very nice. Okay. Yes, it's the best way to speak English, of course. Rafat, about you? 3 minutes.
Report, yeah, approximately about 3 minutes.
Okay, then we have, as I see, 6 or 7 reports. It take approximately, I think, 30 minutes, 35 minutes. Also, Georg will have a speech, I think. And 30 minutes we will have for the discussion.
Иван, ты меня слышишь?
Да, слышно.
Да, включи, пожалуйста, видео, потому что меня не видно.
Наталья Викторовна здесь, да?
Здравствуйте.
Здравствуйте, Наталья Викторовна.
Да, вот сейчас Руслан подключает меня, потому что я вас всех вижу прекрасно. У меня все...
вот так, окей.
Но у вас включено видео, Наталья Викторовна?
Ну вот, не знаю, почему, меня пока не видно.
Did you telephone to professor?
I tried to call him, but the phone was busy, so I guess he's on the line talking with someone else at the moment, and I sent him a WhatsApp message.
Okay, but I think shall we start? What do you think?
I guess so. I think.
Also, we don't see Ramin.
Ramin is alive. I met Ramin. This morning. Professor Brandstetter is online.
Oh, Professor.
Hello, everybody. Fine.
Oh, Professor.
Nice to see you. That's great.
Ramin, I met 3 hours ago in a meeting which was hosted by Bravo Justice in Kiev. So he was alive. He was dressed up in his office, and I guess he will be with us then soon.
Maybe we'll ask Asya at the same time to make some telephone call to Ramin.
Okay.
If it's possible, let him enjoy.
Okay.
So let me introduce the Russian side, if possible. And then, Georg, you or Professor, also if I will introduce you to our Russian side members. And then we have some reports. Because if I'm right, 7 or 6 people want to make a quite short report for 3-4 minutes, and then we can discuss. So it's our first round table, international round table, with the participation of the Austrian side, Serbian side, Russia, and also representative from Azerbaijan. So, Professor Brandstetter, Georg, we have here representatives from Russian Economic University, of Plekhanov Russian Economic University, and from the Institute of Legislations and Comparative Law under the government of the Russian Federation. Natalia Sveshnikova is Deputy Director of my institute, Institute of Legal Research and, what's the name of my institute? Legal Research and, okay, let's say Legal Research and the Regional Integration. Voice Mektiv.
I can see.
Mektiv is also works in the Institute of Legislations Comparative Law. He is natively from Baku but working in Moscow. Kirill Nalyotov, he is teacher, he is member of our department in Russian Economic University of Plekhanov. Mr. Shulyatyev, representative of Institute of Comparative Law. And also, that's all or not? But where's Asya? You know Asya, all of you, it's also, she works also in our Russian Economic Academy of Plekhanov, and also works in the Institute of Legislation Comparative Law. And Rafat Kurbanov, my son, he works with his uncle in Baku. He represents the Gaydar Aliyev Fund, which is situated in Baku, and also is making a master program in Institute of Legislation and Comparative Law. It's our Russian side. For the Russian people, I was to introduce the first Professor Brandstetter. It's former Minister of Justice of Austria, our very good elder friend, and now he's a member of Constitutional Court of Austria, and also Professor, Doctor of Law, Vienna University of Economics. Georg Stava, former president of CEPES, but it's not right word to say former. I think Georg Stava is a permanently president of CEPES. Very honored, our very good friend. Now he's, if I am right, the former advisor of the Minister of Justice in Serbia. Yes. And also he works in our department in Russian Economic University of Plekhanov. So please, Georg, give report to you.
Thanks a lot, Rafat, to introduce so to say, what you call the Russian side. Thanks for the initiative and for the good idea we had. It's a perfect setup of people, and it's very good to see a lot of well-known faces. Very warm welcome from Belgrade side. Just 2 sentences. I'm working in Belgrade as some judicial attaché for Western Balkans, so I'm counseling the Ministry of Justice in Austria on Western Balkan issues, but as Rashad said, still connected and a lot of connected with European judicial politics via CEPES and similar networks, and therefore enjoying this kind of exchange of especially what's going on and shedding a light on the risks and what is opportunities to come up. I may pass. Should we introduce each other, because I don't know our dear colleague Valentin Spechler, for example, or I see that Ramin is with us now, so we have not only a Russian side but an Azeri side as well with us. So we may pass the word first, and then I'm coming back and giving the speech. Is that what you intended, Rashad?
Yes, why not?
Okay.
Just may I ask you, did my student Valentin already join us?
Yeah.
Oh, fine. He's online. Fine.
Online, yes.
Hello, Valentin.
Hi. Good to see you all.
He's one of the best students I ever had. He worked for me at the Constitutional Court for a couple of months, and now, I think it's not a secret, Valentin. You're working for a couple of months for the President of the Parliament, and at the same time you are writing your work at the university, dissertation. You want to become a doctor, and you will. So I'm really happy that you can join us today. Thank you.
Our pleasure also.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure for me to join this group, and I'm hoping that I can take a lot out of it and also give something back.
Perfect.
We missed to mention and invite Ramin to say hello. As you were mentioning CEPESH, it is of course to mention the president of CEPESH, which is Ramin Kurbanov, who joins us from his office in Baku. Hi, Ramin.
Thank you, Georg. I would like to meet everybody. I was a little bit late. This is my third video conference today. I'm just finalized with the emoji. And in the morning, we had the common who participated together with and Georg. Do you remember? So this is the third one. So sorry that I connected a little bit late. So.
Okay.
Maybe we give some time for reports about from Austria, from Russia, from Azerbaijan, and then make a discussion.
Yeah, totally fine. I may have more some general points from regional perspective. So you, as you suggested, I may start and give an input of about 5 minutes, and then we come back to others and have a discussion. Even to make it easier to put it, I put it on some slides, so I may share my desktop here with you. Just a second.
Georg,
Yeah.
Ruslan has your slideshow. He can start.
Ah, okay, but I can do it here as well. Isn't it easier? Can you see it?
Okay.
We can see it. Perfect.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Unless you have a Russian version, I translated it not because I was short on time on doing this. First of all, if we talk about constitutional or issues of judiciary in general and the COVID crisis, let's call it like this, let's all recall that this is a health crisis. Yeah? This is not a crisis of rule of law or the institutions. And as I always saying these days, rule of law is not on sick leave. That's a mistake. Yeah? Rule of law is just active and is not affected by the virus. The virus does a lot of negative things, but the virus itself is not affecting it. So in everything we do, let's keep an eye on that we protect our institutions and protect the rule of law as it would be normally. There might be a lot of other intentions around which may affect the institution, the work of courts, even the experts' roles and what we usually do, and cover it up with, this is because of Corona crisis. And I really highlighted as some kind of a beginner that the crisis is not any kind of excuse for deficits, for shortcomings, for misusing or reducing standards or to violate legal guarantees. Yet, please, let's be attentive to that, because it will be a very, very nice and convenient excuse for a lot of people in the next months or even years. And even now, I can't hear it. I don't want to accept it. I don't want to hear it that someone is saying, "No, you know, we couldn't do this because of Corona crisis." What? Yeah, I mean, this is simply some kind of new reality and new framework. It is just to adapt to it. And as we speak of the crisis, and logically, there are some special measures to be applied to for healthcare safeguarding. From legal point of view, the thing I'm concerned most is that the crisis never ends. The most dangerous sentences in these days are not any kind of discussions about curfews or death toll rates or numbers of respirators or whatever. The most dangerous sentences in these days, I think, is, no, the second or the third or the fourth wave will still come, and therefore we need all these kind of special measures. Or we still have to fight the effects of the crisis because they are still around. And therefore, we cannot consider it normal. There must be some kind of new normality or some kind of ongoing special state of whatever. No, yeah, not ever. Try to be attentive to that, and let's not change what we have fought for the last 300 years due to the fact that, I don't know, you should wash your hands, honestly. As careful about this pirating of the crisis by others. I would like to focus a little bit more in the next time, or also invite to focus that we can use it as an opportunity, as every crisis. Okay, plain saying. But if you think about new tools or new technologies around, it is maybe the momentum to make use of it. For example, very easy, some of the countries switch more to video conference tools in court hearings. Okay, yes, I realize that there are problems also with identifying witnesses or parties, but technically possible, likely. But see it as an opportunity that you can open justice also to the public. Nowadays, justice on the paper is public, and you can go to a courthouse and go to a hearing. But honestly, beyond some school classes and board pensioners, nobody does that. And this, if you switch parts of a business at least into video conferencing, we could open hearings to the public also by video conferencing to watch them, which is an opportunity maybe to raise the trust into judiciary, which is an issue for a lot of countries, just as an example. It might also be an opportunity to improve the monitoring or efficiency of justice, or come up with new judicial management tools. And it may also be an opportunity to do a little bit, let's say, modern law drafting in the way that there must be a quick reaction to handling backlogs, getting the courts on service, maybe working from decentralized position, analyzing it. In Bosnia, for example, they realized that from the moment on, when they sent the judges into home office, the judges in the second instance at home work much more productive than in the court. They issue much more decisions, which is to some extent quite logic. I mean, my colleague from Bosnia said, yeah, this is typically because we have a lot of coffee culture in our offices. Yeah, meaning you start in the morning with a coffee break, and then you meet someone else and go for a coffee. If you sit at home with your files, this is the most interesting thing you can do, maybe. So maybe it is something to say, okay, if I can monitor what the judge is doing by statistics, she or he may do this at home and every second week meeting for panel sessions. But this is only possible if I have proper judicial management, and so applying the tools, putting out the tools would be something which is to be developed in the next months, definitely. In overall, to sum it up, is that justice must go on, of course. The question for the alternative would be to deny the justice. We cannot lock up the courts only and say, let's wait until the virus is gone. And it is, of course, to continue with all that kind of safeguardings and application of standards we did so far. If I look around in the region, just to give you a little bit an impression, then almost all the countries did the same, at least in Central and in Southeastern Europe. Everybody, of course, first locked down the business, reduced the business to what is the most important thing. Some countries, of course, that means if you want to be still productive, you need an excellent electronic system to do that, to enable judges still to work at home, or even the lawyers to join in. Some of the countries came up with new technologies immediately and saying, okay, we do hearings on Skype or Zoom. Also, you need either the technology and the readiness. Footnote for discussion, by the way, the private lawyers were always against these video hearings for certain reasons, because, of course, they lose the show with the clients. And on the first reason, and on the other hand, it is, of course, to talk about security. But as the crisis locked down also their business, in more and more countries, I can hear now that the lawyers are becoming even eager to do something. And brief hearings together with a judge and another lawyer and maybe an expert or one witness is something you can easily do on the screen like we do now. So the lawyers are coming up and saying, okay, if you do easy hearings, we may do this because then they can invoice at least something, and even in the crisis have some basic business paying the secretary. So I think it's a good momentum to restore the business a little bit, to come up with new solutions like electronic dispute resolution, and maybe also to stop with some behaviors we took on board 200 years ago, which we don't need anymore. For example, someone in a conference this morning in Poland said that we have the problem identifying the witnesses maybe in front of the judge, but I can let him swear in front of the camera and testify him by paper, which is scanned and sent then to prove his identity. And my answer was simply, I mean, come on, guys. Yeah, if I'm ordering pizza now, every pizza delivery service is able to identify my payment and my address to deliver the pizza on the right spot. And so this must be possible in judiciary as well. This cannot be that we swear around or, I don't know, send us scanned PDFs like 200 years ago writing to the court. But this is a little bit the surrounding which I've come across. And yeah, key message is let's take this opportunity and try to fit the business into something which may become a modern judiciary. Stopping here and looking forward to discussing them later, because otherwise I'm consuming too much time on it.
Okay. Joe, thank you very much for this interesting information. We in Russia have the same problem with this judge system. I talked just today with several judges. They always talk that now they have enormous quantity of bills and could not do nothing. But I want to mention that the experience of CEPESH, of course, is very progressive and play a big role in all this electronic development, especially in the judge sphere. I want to ask the president of CEPESH, Ramin Gurbanov, maybe he give us some information, some ideas about his view, and then we ask Rafat Gurbanov also give us some information about the legislation in this COVID situation in Baku. Ramin, please.
Okay, thank you very much for the floor. Dear participants of this video conference, I would like to say that at present, the world is facing a unique combination of a health pandemic and an economic crisis rolling out simultaneously. We know that the justice systems, like all other systems of our society, are affected by this crisis in many ways, both directly and indirectly. And justice systems and institutions, including court and tribunals, and the individuals that work in and use them, have been required to comply with relevant social distancing regulations and other emergency measures. All these measures have led to significant changes to court procedures and to some extent the temporary closures of courts in many countries. As a result, the citizens face with some restrictions of their constitutional rights and freedoms, such as access to justice, right to fair trial within a reasonable time, right to protection of personal data. Countries around the world are taking many steps to find alternative means to administer the justice, provide access to justice, and facilitate resolution of legal disputes in the face of this pandemic. Most other parts of society, including schools, banks, clinics, have been doing the same, but sometimes we observe that all these measures are chaotic, not efficient, and sometimes not so sufficient. Taking into account that during the pandemic period, people are more likely to face increasing concerns relating to employment, family issues, health, debt, housing, the courts and justice institutions are crucial to break the circle of vulnerability and deliver all services on electronic base for restoring the above mentioned rights. These reforms range from online service delivery by courts, alternative mechanisms to resolve disputes, to enhance the use of data to plan judicial workload and greater coordination of services across sectors. I would like to say that we expect that in this period, the caseload in all courts will be considerably increased due to suspension of procedures, in particularly in labor cases, in some offenses, family disputes, rental issues, bank credits. And also this will include the new types of cases, such as sanctions against the individuals for breaches of guarantees, remedies against other emergency measures. The most important need that courts face during this crisis is the delivery of justice services for urgent cases, especially in the criminal field, that cannot be postponed or suspended. And in this regard, necessity of remote administration of justice came at stake and became demanded. Taking into account that the suspension of court proceeding may cause huge case backload for judges and lawyers in the aftermath of the COVID-19, the prioritization of cases following the end of emergency measures should not overemphasize economic interest or the protection of rights of individuals, and should follow fair and objective criteria. In the OECD report, a few days ago, we had also one conference, and the main concern which was stressed out by the experts from OECD, that some of the countries, the politicians, they try to pay more attention to the economic disputes rather to the other cases relating to the protection of human rights in the aftermath period. And my personal view that it should be no any prioritization, and the cases should be considered in accordance with the entry date. And several courts around the world have started this transitional period, and we observed in CEPEJ that in Greece, Latvia, Slovenia, Italy, Switzerland, Romania, and other countries, they are trying to change the administration of justice on online trials by means of video streaming services. And in this way, they are using the systems like Skype, Zoom, Cisco, or Microsoft Teams. But in parallel to this, some countries now paying more attention to the digitalization of cases in order to reduce the paper dependence and to ensure timely online access to documents by judges, even from their home. Other innovative ways to enhance this that include ensuring the effectiveness of online identity verification, because all these online systems requires this verification, and also most of the countries now try to implement the validity of electronic signature of all legal documents for all parties, and also the mainstreaming of online or telephone public services, which would usually be done in person. For example, in United Kingdom, all this civil registry for death now transformed to the online basis. For example, in Azerbaijan, all this power of attorneys, which is delivered by the notaries, now it's online. So the people can apply to notaries and take this power of attorney without visiting the notary office, which are closed at the moment. And I would like to know that the other problems which the countries can face, this is the necessity of changing the traditional court rituals. Because, for example, if I consider Azerbaijan, as Georg mentioned, that also I can share some information about my country. So we started from last week the implementation of online dispute in the courts in civil and commercial cases, but we faced with some violation of these rituals. For example, the judges, when they talk to parties, normally they had to stand up, or the judges, when they proclaim the final decisions, the citizens should stand up, and so on. Of course, we refused from these traditional court rituals, but at the same time, I think the legislators should consider the possibility of drafting this in parallel with some rituals in accordance with the online court hearings. And in this regard, for example, in CPESH, it exists a new working group on cyber justice and artificial intelligence. It was formed like this year, so it started operated from this year. And at present, in order to develop so-called pan-European standards in implementation of online trials, the experts of this group run the discussions on the, especially on the quality requirement, on the developing the practical guidelines, how to use the online court proceedings, how to digitalize of all court files, what and standards relating to e-filing, because there are the questions during the pandemic period. Should the countries stop the the collection of these suits, or to keep it open? For example, in case of Azerbaijan, despite the issue that the courts are closed at the moment, with some exceptions, but still all the civil suits are still entering the courts. It means that this will increase the backlogs of judges when all these preventive measures will come to the end. So we face with many challenges, and I think, to my understanding, in order to protect these rights, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch should cooperate. But in practice, we see the isolation of the judicial branch, and the legislators and the executive representatives, they pay more attention to the other measures in order to prevent the spread of this virus. I think that this also should be taken into account, that after all this pandemic, what will happen with the court, because with all this huge backlog, judges cannot deliver the quality services for citizens. So there's some ideas for discussion, and we can have this exchange of our views. Thank you.
Rafa, give some information about legislation in Baku.
So, before starting my report, I would like to introduce myself. So, good afternoon. My name is Rafat Gurbanov. I'm a specialist at Haidar Ali Foundation and a master candidate at the Institute of Legislature and Comparative Law under the government of the Russian Federation. I would like to brief you on the measures undertook by the Cabinet of Ministers and the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan to combat the spread of COVID-19 in the country. So the first action plan was created by the Cabinet of Ministers on January 30th, 2020, before the pandemic even reached the country. Due to Iran becoming a local epicenter of the coronavirus, the government decided to set up checkpoints and mobile hospitals at the border. Azerbaijan has later donated more than 5 million manat to help Islamic Republic of Iran to combat the pandemic. On the 28th of February, the first official case of coronavirus was registered in the country. Moreover, borders with Iran, Georgia, and Russian Federation were temporarily closed, and visas to the country were temporarily suspended. Azerbaijan has organized special flights to return their citizens to the country. Returning citizens have to go through a mandatory quarantine. Education was also suspended until the May 4th. National holiday Novruz and all other scheduled events were cancelled. However, necessary structure remained active even during the national holidays. Quarantine was also imposed by the Cabinet of Ministers. The regulation under quarantine included temporary closure of cafes, restaurants, malls, parks. Citizens were not allowed to leave their house except for grocery shopping, pharmacies, and other emergencies. Citizens should notify the authorities in case they leave their house via SMS system developed by the government. The president had issued a decree awarding a monetary bonus to all medical workers helping the fight against a pandemic. Furthermore, the Coronavirus Response Fund was created to cover all necessary expenses. During this certain time, a further 1 billion manat was transferred to help small and medium businesses. The president has also ordered release of convicts who are 65 or older. Releases are reviewed on case-by-case basis. Finally, seeing the positive dynamic in the number of new cases, the government has decided to slowly weaken the quarantine regime in the country. To conclude, the measures undertaken by the government have changed the normal life of the citizens, decreasing the freedom of movement, ability of finding employment, and freedom of gathering in public. All those measures are infringements of human rights. They were done to prevent the spread of pandemic and delivered the positive results. Thank you for your attention. That's all that I wanted to say about it.
Perfect.
Ruslan.
Rashad Afan, repeat please.
Да, да, да.
Okay. Now I say we want to come back from Baku to Vienna to Professor Brandstetter. Possible, Professor, some words, some ideas.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, we have a Russian majority, no question of it. And it was great how many ideas we could hear from your side now. And I would like to talk about a special problem we just now have in Austria, and it has to do with the constitution and the question how many restrictions should be allowed referring to constitutional rights. And that's just one issue I wanted to raise. I mean, the restrictions of demonstration. We have these restrictions, and just this week in Vienna, we had a demonstration against the restrictions of demonstrations. And the police, according to the corona laws we have now, the police stopped this demonstration. And it's just always a question of what is proportionate. How much can you really restrict fundamental rights? And this is really a big issue now. And just yesterday, the German Constitutional Court made a decision saying that there must not be too many restrictions on religious service, especially during Ramadan for the Muslim people. And they declared that if there are some security measures, the state should not have the right to restrict all these religious services and everything which is connected with that. So this is a very interesting issue, and we will have to decide in our Constitutional Court very soon about the question if the restriction we still have in Austria that huge shops are not allowed to open because too many people could come in, and then it would be impossible to control the distance between the people. If this is really proportionate, if it is adequate or not. So I would be interested in the question, how do you handle this problem, restrictions of demonstration and restrictions of opening shops and restrictions, especially referring to people above 65? I mean, this is really a very difficult question. Can we really prevent people from gathering anywhere, from joining any demonstration or whatever it could be, just because they are above 65? I mean, we in Austria, we have overcome a situation that the attempt of suicide has been sanctioned since more than 200 years. So it's a question of personal responsibility. And well, I think it is really a problem that we talk about restrictions like that, preventing people above 65 from social life. At the same time, with restrictions referring to the shops which are quite large or quite huge. So I think we should make a distinction between these restrictions. So this would be my question or my point or my issue. Are there discussions like that in your country too? I suppose there are. I mean, restrictions on demonstration and especially the hard restrictions, let's say, against people being above 65 or being part of the so-called risky group. I mean, this is a different quality of restriction, I think. But we will have to discuss about this here in Austria, and we will have to decide about the restrictions that could be acceptable or not. And I'm quite sure that we already now have some restrictions which are probably not really proportionate, not really necessary in an open democratic society. And this is the discussion we have to have now. And I would be very interested in your ideas on that. And I would like to prepare, well, I mean, we heard a wonderful lecture from Georg. You know, you have to know that Georg, he was always one of the best in the Ministry of Justice when I was minister, and he prepared a wonderful lecture. And I'm going to prepare, well, sort of a small and short lecture about this issue, the restrictions of fundamental rights in Austria, and maybe including Germany, which is quite the same. So I think I will try to have slides too. They won't be as perfect as the slides from Georg, but this would be my issue if possible. And if we could just compare these restrictions on fundamental rights in our countries. Would you agree with that?
Rashad, your microphone is off. We can't hear you.
You couldn't hear me?
No, Rashad. Rashad is speaking to us, but I can only see his moving mouth. Now it's possible to hear.
But Ruslan, there's some problem in the. Sometimes I see that the organizer close something or open something. It's okay with you there?
It's totally fine.
Could you hear me or not?
Yeah, but you still have the ability to turn on your voice.
Okay, but okay. Professor, thank you very much. Just only for the information for these restrictions. For example, yesterday we have a demonstration in Novosibirsk. It is a city in Siberia. It is not normal a demonstration, but 200, 300, 400 people, despite of all these restrictions, it was very nice weather in Novosibirsk, go out boulevard, watching, dancing, and so on and so on. And the police couldn't make also any penalties because in that region, we don't have the legal basis for making a penalty as a money penalty for the going outside. But today we have information that, for example, more than 100 people now are in the hospital after one night.
Oh.
So there's the problem with the health, there's problem with the legal basis, there's problems with restrictions, but I think our government and all the government all over the world really don't know what to do in this situation.
But I suppose that the police will take action if there will be a gathering of people like that.
No, they could not stop.
They didn't stop it?
No. 300-400 people go to boulevard outside to the river. There's a big river in Novosibirsk, and watching, dancing, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours. We just
Well,
look on TV.
I can tell you in Austria, the police takes action against that. They do. And
Russia is big. For example, in Moscow, it's impossible, but in some districts which is far away from here,
okay.
maybe we have such accidents. Okay, let's ask somebody from Russian side to give some information. Yes, please go. Please, sorry.
I just wanted to reflect briefly, very briefly, on the very important question Professor Brandstetter mentioned in regard of locking up people with the age of 65 plus. For example, here, this was one of, in Serbia, it was one of the first measures that everybody above the age of 65 was not allowed to leave the house anyway, 24 hours. And this is now a status since for longer than 6 weeks. And now the pensioners are allowed to go out at least an hour in the evening to walk a little bit around, but they are allowed to do this between 6 in the evening and midnight. It's not the classic time of the day where pensioners would like to go out usually. And their shopping is allowed in the early morning. So there is once a week special shopping time slot for pensioners between 4 a.m. in the morning and 8 a.m. in the morning. Means you restrict personal freedom of a whole group of society like they would be in prison. Even in prison, you are allowed to move more. You have the right, I think, to move minimum half an hour a day in the yards at least. And even you're allowed to go shopping to some extent, internally at least. These are really harsh measures. And I understand that at the first beginning to fight the crisis, we needed some kind of strict measures immediately to look and watch. But it is definitely the time to carefully question these kind of measures, because what is the price for it, for the preventing the ability of being killed by this virus? I mean, for example, my father is 80 years old, fit and living in a nice area in surroundings is green. He would not prefer to be locked up the next maybe 10 years which are left from his life and not meeting his grandchildren anymore, just with the risk of maybe being killed by a virus. I mean, if you are 80, you will die, and this is what we all forget, that at the end we will die anyway. Yeah, I mean, Friedrich the Große, the Prussian emperor, asked his soldiers before a battle once that, do you instead of fighting, would you like to prefer to live forever? This is, nobody of us lives forever. It is just always this kind of balancing of risks. And if the risk getting the virus is maybe approximately the same like being killed in a car traffic accident, and in many of the European countries at the moment it is by statistics, then we learn to accept certain risks. And if I would be 80, I wouldn't stay at home. If you want to stay at home, do it, but I wouldn't do it for the price of not having a normal life and not meeting my kids or grandchildren anymore.
Georg, it's a crucial point. Just let me add this sentence. What I want to say is, it makes a difference if you tell someone who is above 65, okay, you're not allowed to join a huge gathering or to join a demonstration. Okay, but it makes a difference to tell him you are not allowed to leave your house or your apartment anyway. You have to stay there at home and you must not go out. So this is a difference. And I think such an intensive restriction of fundamental rights, well, I mean, I don't think that this is really acceptable. I mean, I'm 62. Maybe this is one of the reasons why I'm very interested in this question, but I don't want the state and the government to take care of my own situation and my personal situation as much as they do like this. I mean, it's my personal risk and I want to be responsible for myself. And that's exactly what Georg said. And I think such a restriction is not really necessary. I mean, this will be one of the huge and crucial discussions we will have later on anyway. So, I mean, it's not, you know, it's not enough to say, okay, anyone above 65, there's a big difference between people who are fit with 80, and some people are members of a so-called risky group with 40. So I think this goes too far. This goes really too far, I think. So, well, this is the issue I wanted to raise. But not only because I'm 62, no. By the way, I had some technical problems too with my handyphone. I have quite a new handyphone, and well, to be honest, it's a Chinese one. So maybe sorry for that. It's a Chinese one. It's a Huawei, but I had some problems during our meeting. But now I can see and hear you again without any problems.
Okay, let's have some reports from Russian side. Please, 3 minutes maximum. Try to give some information. Let's begin with whom? With Руслан, ты не готов, да, у нас отвечать? Ты будешь участвовать. Так, with Кирилл. Кирилл Налетов. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. My report is the problem of conditional obligations in force majeure situations. Well, even without pandemic circumstances, we are acting in the world which is lacking in amount stability. So the problem is not new, but in this I agree with Mr. Georg Stava, Periat Mundis, Vivat Justitia. Parties of contracts are interested in non-reciprocally proper performance of the contract. But even less parties want to be accused in the breach of their contract, especially when there was their mistake in this. Russian law contains a big amount of instruments to avoid such situations to help the violators. Nevertheless, those instruments do not form a system. And according to William Occam's razor principle, multiply entities without necessity. These are first conditional obligations, conditional performance of obligations, counter performance of obligations, and force majeure. First, Russian law lets the parties of a contract to make obligations conditional, which appear, change, or terminate legally after the appearance of the fact which is not known whether it will come or not. This is the way the parties insure themselves without concluding insurance contract. So this is the remedy for the circumstances they can imagine to appear but not normally expect. The second, conditional performance of an obligation means that contractual obligations can be performed, changed, or terminated under a condition of commitment or non-commitment of some actions by the party to such an obligation or other circumstances meant expressly in the contract, including pandemic, of course, if we can mean it expressly in the contract. So this is the shield for the breaches, for the breach of duties, which performance depends from the performance of other party, which is highly likely, which is not will not be performed due to the reasons of pandemic too. The practical problem, is Russian courts rarely recognize such duties as dependent from the duties which are highly likely to be broken. Third is counter-performance of an obligation. Counter-performance of an obligation can be suspended or refused by a party due to the existence of the circumstances obviously evidence the fact that the primal obligation of another party will not be performed at contractual term. Different conditional obligation. Here, the party which has refused or suspended the performance of obligation of counter performance of obligation can sue the other party de jure, both for damages and for the lost profit. In practice, it is quite hard to differ these three types of obligations. It makes hard to take the appropriate position in the court as a practicing lawyer. Finally, Russian, as all European civil or commercial codes, Russian, we have only civil codes in Russia, like in Italy. We don't have commercial code. Finally, Russian civil code permits the non-performance of contractual duties if the violator will prove that proper performance of the contract had become impossible by the reasons of force majeure. which is to be proved by the certificate of force majeure issued by Russian Federation Chamber of Commerce and Industry. The problem is Russian courts they have a very formal practice. They require one certificate for one contract, even if the performance of contractual duties is to be at the same place as the other contract, which is already recognized non-performed due to the force majeure. This problem seems not to be serious for the large companies, for global corporations, but for small business, the main victim of pandemic. For small business, of course, the price of at least $1,000 for one certificate seems to be high. So, thank you very much.
Okay.
Rashad Afatovich.
Yes, just a moment. I have some problem. Okay, we can ask who is next from the Russian side?
We have Igor and Mehdi.
So Mehdi, let's begin from you.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, it was my knowledge with the Zoom that was the problem with the computer.
Thanks a lot for this opportunity to participate. And I would like to speak about some issues concerning human rights and constitutional rights from a little bit different perspective, from the perspective of international monetary regulation and global finance and how it affects all of us in times of in times of the pandemic, how it affects our rights. So here already been some notes about the fact that people went to streets and then got ill and so on. And we also know that governments around the world said that it is difficult to provide assistance or healthcare services for all at times of this pandemic because the pressure for the government institution is too high. And because of that, our rights had to be limited in order to protect us. And first of all, of course, to protect our lives, right, which is very important for us. So, but today we face not only the humanitarian crisis, but economic crisis at the same time. We have a demand shock, and we also see that pre-pandemic issues trigger problems of human rights protections in these new conditions. And here I would like to refer to constitutional powers of central banks, which are very much involved in circulation of money and finances, and which is very much important, in fighting the pandemic. So, constitutional powers of central banks around the world cover monetary regulation within national jurisdiction. It doesn't regulate any actions of monetary authorities outside of the government, outside of the national jurisdiction. And we also know that central banks have a wide discretion. It's also a constitutional norm, a wide discretion in conducting monetary policy, like in order to stabilize currency system and so on, to deal with balance of payment deficit, free flow of capital, currency stability in general, and so on. And these powers also are executed independently from other authorities, other state organs. And this is essential to support the natural function of market economy. We know that free pricing and competition, they are very important for making sure that economy works, and today global economy works in this way. And we also know that human rights includes such rights as property rights. Property rights from business perspective, from finance, also means the right to generate profit from assets employed. And it's of course it's a crucial and indispensable for any market economy, and requires also the rule of law, so that executing these rights will be possible. So market economies also demonstrated flexibility and ability to adjust to changing conditions. And in result, the world became very interconnected and interdependent, and global production change, added value chain, these all tied regions together. And this was one of the reasons why coronavirus spread so fast. And just after a month, it became pandemic in February, I remember. And today, because all this change disrupted and population of entire countries are under lockdown, there is a sharp decline of demand for traditional goods and services and other things, which also includes some sectors of economy which affect healthcare. So this is the biggest economic crisis since Great Depression. That's already we know today. We will know it better after 1 or 2 months. We will know in June what really happens in the world. And another problem also is the size of financial markets. And we know that in developed countries, its size is bigger than 60%. It's up to 70 and 80% in developed world, and around 30-40% in emerging markets. And this is the result of actions done by monetary authorities before pandemic, because before pandemic we've seen the decline of inflation and so on around the world. I will not go in details to these financial issues and so on, but we know that central banks decreased interest rate to zero. There was quantitative easing, like printing money and so on and so forth. So this was the reason why the world was the global economy was in a condition that a small issue could turn it into crisis, and that's what happened. And their central banks didn't really interact with each other properly. International law only provides some general limitations for their actions, like harmonization of monetary policy and so on, but still monetary policy are conducted independently, and the treaties usually respect interests of member states in this case. So the conducting of monetary policy was not properly regulated neither on national level nor on international level. And we also know that there are some instruments when some country has a problem, and other financial institutions try to provide an assistance, and assistance is to provide loans, but they provide loans in exchange of spending cuts and so on and so forth. And we've seen it in the Eurozone, and there are many other countries around the world which were part of these programs with the International Monetary Fund and World Bank and so on. And so we see that because central banks acted differently, they had different policies, but at the same time they had to, let's say, involve into so-called currency wars when they try to depreciate national currencies and so on and so forth. This caused a disorder, and because of that, some countries had troubles, and especially South European. And here I would like to cite the United Nations human rights about the conditions of about the condition in Greece, and it was before 2017. Sorry, I'm already too long. I just give him please 1 or 2 minutes.
3 minutes was the limit.
All right, sorry.
Please try to finish this.
All right, just 2 sentences.
Okay.
So in the case of Greece, the United Nations Human Rights Committee concluded that all these restriction measures and spending cuts and so on, they were in violation of several human rights obligations, including the right to work, health, and social security. So my point is that in these conditions of the pandemic, we should provide even more restrictions than we have today, and these restrictions should cover the abilities of the discretion of central banks, and to make sure that central banks and financial system also works for solving problems of this pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Georg, I am sorry. We have 2 more reporters. Professor, if you also agree, we give them for 2 minutes, 3 minutes report, and then we can talk finally and say bye-bye or continue. So we have.
Well, I think we will have to continue our discussion next time anyway, because the time is too short to cover all aspects.
We can make it, yes. Maybe, I don't know, in 20 days, one time, or in 2 weeks.
There's still time enough. So
okay. To hear the statements, yes, anyway, yes.
And if possible, so Minister Shulatyev, you got off?
Yes, I'm ready.
You for 3 minutes, and also then we want to ask Valentin to be prepared. Because we began with Austria, with Georg as the Austrian representative. We have to finish with the Austrian guy.
Good. Dear Professor Kurbanov, dear colleagues, thanks you for this wonderful online workshop. I'm specialized in international law, so my brief conclusions, or I name it impressions about COVID-19 and international law, I tell you in 3 steps as I see this situation right now. First, we see that COVID-19 is not only the legal problem. We see that all decisions are made by using the professional organization, professional opinions. For example, some days ago, World Health Organization Europe Department publishes considerations for gradual easing of COVID-19 measures. So it means that not just COVID, it's not just and constitutional restrictions is legal problem. Second, in international level, we see that we don't have a strong international legal mechanisms for combating such pandemic events. Third, we see that soft law is a basic instrument for international cooperations. And fourth, conclusions concerning with human rights, I quote the statement by Michelle Bachelet, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. In her statement on 19 April, she told that emergency measures may well be needed to respond to the public health emergency, but an emergency situation is not a blank check to disregard human rights obligations. What does it mean? I make a common conclusion, but colleagues, I repeat, it's just first impressions. It's not my scientific views yet. That constitutional rights and its restrictions are the basic ground for regulations, but the mechanisms of such regulations and such restrictions have as a part an international law norm and international law cooperation. Professor Kurbanov, dear colleagues, thank you for your attention. I tried to be briefly.
Thank you.
Can we ask Valentin to say some words?
Well, sure. We heard earlier today that the electronic measures which are applied in the justice system should be supported even more, and it should be able to use electronic applications and devices more in the normal justice system. I just recently did a research for the President of the National Council of Austria, which was regarding the use of technical applications and generally electronic devices in terms of parliamentary work. And during my research, I found out that with regards to the parliamentarian work and the councils, the meetings of the councils, it's quite restricted. So I think, in my opinion, it's not only the justice system where we could apply the use of electronic devices and applications and all that stuff even more, but also in the legislative part of the state. And therefore, I don't know, be more effective, use less capacities, and be more efficient in working for our states. And I think that there's a huge space left to improve the work. And I hope that this crisis is kind of the opener for a rethinking with regards to this matter. And I'm also curious what you think about changing our thoughts on how a state should work or how a parliament could work in times of crisis, and thereby being able to endure working through the crisis no matter how hard the crisis hits the state, and not being we're not being restricted by the crisis itself as an acting state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there has to be one more reporter who make a very good presentation, Anatoly, but I can't see him. Where's Anatoly?
Yeah, I'm here.
Ah, but you are here because in my computer, I don't know why I can't see all of you at one time.
All right.
And I know you make some also some presentation. Yes,
yes, yes, I am. So my name is Anatoly. I'm from Plekhanov in Russia and the Plekhanov Russian University of Economics, and let me introduce some position of our small and medium-sized business here in Russia in case of pandemic. So estimating the economic condition of business entities at that moment, we can say that they need support and protection of the government, and when they need more than ever. First of all, small and medium-sized business enterprises create jobs and stimulate the consumption of goods and services among the citizens, which forces the economy to live and develop. However, in current context of a pandemic, most small and medium-sized enterprises were forced to stop their work in order to prevent spreading the epidemic. Such steps have caused serious losses to business entities and to the Russian economy at all. Even before the acts of measures for self-isolation of citizens came into force, the government of the Russian Federation decided to help business and the trade industry. Among the measures have been taken for small and medium-sized business, we can note payment delay for federal property lease agreements, also reschedule of all tax audits, and the reschedule of complainants verification of current legislations. All these can be called like indirect support measures that make softer pressure on economic entities. As a result of dialogue with representatives of small and medium-sized business, the country's leadership, Mr. Putin, considered these measures really poor. So the president of Russian Federation considered it important to take urgent direct measures to support the economy. The reason is not only the financial losses of the economy, but also worrying about health of citizens working and employed in various sectors, such like including commercial organizations. The affected area that I already showed you include catering, tourism, hotel business, and as well companies that sell non-food products. So to the addition measures taken earlier by the government of Russian Federation, it was decided to provide free financial assistance from the country so that the management of organization would be able to solve an urgent financial problems, which include, first of all, the payment of salary to employees. Also, Putin provided preferential loans to fill up working capital that necessary for the operation of companies. Sorry. As an example of state support was granting more than 23 billions of rubles to support airlines, which were the first who feel the effects of COVID-19. Also taking into account the large companies, small and medium-sized businesses, interpreters, and self-employed citizens are in difficult economic situation in the context of the coronavirus pandemic. Also, it was taken some restrictions that had been introduced. So all the restrictions are don't collect debts and fines from creditors. Also, bankruptcy on initiatives of creditors are stopped. And don't take any rent from residents of technology parks, business incubators, and co-working facilities. And also, I want to take your attention that medical organization and medical equipment suppliers are free from paying taxes. They will not pay any taxes and fees in this period. But as a period of concession, it will take part during the end of the year, and after that, all preferences for business will be cancelled. Of course, we understand we need to cancel it because nowadays it's very difficult economic situation for all country, for all world, and for medium and small business requirements and working and taking part in state contracts, and the requirements were lowered and reduced. To sum up, I want to say that we can note that the measures taken are not exhaustive, but the government will continue work to protect our business, take into account the conclusion and analytical data that are already emerging. So that's it, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. May I just ask one question referring to what we already heard now? May I ask? Yes, I would like to know these restrictions on economy in Russia. Do they have an open end, or is it already clear how long they should be valid?
So they will be valid till the end of the year. So from the first
end of the year. Wow.
Okay. Yes, because I believe this restriction will be work till the end of the year because of the difficult situation, not only because of coronavirus, but it's also include the situation because of the oil prices. You know, that's why we have to make our business run, to make our business moving a little bit, you know, because it's very important for them. It's very important for interpreters.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
A lot of the problems which come to us at once, in one time. Petrol prices and coronavirus. I have a proposal. First, as the information, all the people who took part today in this first hour international roundtable, I want to ask you all to send your your name to Asya Bilalova, because we will prepare some certificate with the signature, with the logo of CEPES, Commission for the European Commission, of Vienna University, of Russian Economic University, and Institute of Legislation. With the logo, and we will send you this certificate for the first time taking part in our international roundtable. And as the idea for the future, Professor Branstetter, you really mentioned very interesting idea. Yes, it's restrictions. So, for example, restriction for the people who is more than 65. But tomorrow the government can make the restriction for the people, for example, who has, I don't know, different color of I don't know, face, or the people who is more than
for example
20. So maybe we have some round table especially for this topic, the restrictions, as you say, for some group of people. It doesn't matter what is the basis of these people.
Yes.
So it is the people, because it is not only for the people who is more than 65. In Russia, we put the two groups. The first, the people who is more than 65. The second part is the people who has some, for example, bronchitis, I don't know, some illness. So so the government put this group of people to the separate panel. And the people rights. Maybe we'll talk for this next hour, next round.
Okay, I really would like to prepare a statement with slides on this issue, because I mean, if nobody is allowed to go out, this is in the favor of everyone. But if just people above 65 are not allowed to go out, and you tell them this is in your favor, then no wonder if they say, okay, this is my problem, not yours. That's exactly the problem. This distinction between different groups of persons, and this is
yeah. We have also this positive discrimination with it. For example, here you're allowed to go out more if you own a dog.
Yes, also the district.
For example, I'm not allowed to go for an evening walk, even if the weather is fine, and I would harm nobody with if I walk the parks and along Sava River. But if I would have a dog, I would be allowed to walk out an hour in the evening. You see that something which was created in favor of a certain group also is at the end is discriminating and definitely not a equality principle. So I think
I still have a battery dog for my kids. I will send it to you. Okay. So.
Thanks a lot. But Rashad Tafatovic, I think this topic is really an important one, because it starts with we want to protect the group, then we maybe limit a group or give some kind of preparations, and this may remain as some kind of dividing society into certain groups where you come on with that kind of it is normal to discriminate rules and to come up with some kind of behavior making people think that this is normal. Yeah, I don't know. People who have a work are allowed to use public transport, for example. If you're unemployed, you don't, or things like that. There's a lot of strange developments around which will come up or are already, and I guess this must be the paradise of scientists at the end, because you will have examples endlessly which are completely stupid and discriminating at the end.
Just one addition as a joke. So it means that if you have dog, you can go outside. If I have cat, I can't go.
No,
it's only for dogs, you see? Yeah. Not for cats.
I don't know if I have a lion. What is about if I'm becoming exotic then from this Netflix?
Alligator.
Yeah. If I have a lion, I'm allowed to go out with my lion or my circus tiger, or an elephant, not a dog. So,
so let's talk about this issue next time. I would like to do that and start with a statement referring to this issue next time, if you allow me to do so.
It will be our pleasure. I think we can organize it in some times, and maybe in 2 weeks. I don't know. Prepare the topic, and I think I can
do so.
It will be our pleasure.
And I learned today that we will have to find an expert on economy from our side, because I'm not an expert on economy, and I think Georg, you won't be an expert on economy either, or are you?
No, I'm not.
So maybe we can find another participant who is really an expert on that. So I will try to do so.
We'll make the same. We'll also try to find some another guys who will be able to take part.
Okay.
And once more, after taking part in quite some amount of similar conferences or small workshops, I think the idea to focus on one topic and keep it brief together, and therefore having it maybe shorter, so 1 hour maximum, is much better, because everybody is then easier to reserve this 1 hour to focus on the topic, exchange a little bit, and fine, because it's easy to meet. There is no need to behave like on a big conference where if people fly to Moscow, of course, to the institute, then we meet for a full day, minimum of 2 days, to take the opportunity to discuss physically. But in digital, it's easy to meet even for half an hour. And therefore, let's agree on one topic. They exchange, bring maybe someone in who is even specialized, and even one input would be enough to talk and discuss about.
So could we, just to have asked that, could we focus on this issue of, let's call it, risk distinction for next time. Risk distinction.
And the human rights, yes?
Yes, of course, yes. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay.
What about all our colleagues? Everybody agrees.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, good idea. We will have time to prepare on our second table. Thank you very much to everybody. Большое спасибо. Профессор, danke schön. George, danke.
Пожалуйста.
Пожалуйста.
Очень приятно.
Виталий Викторович, спасибо.
Спасибо.
Коллеги, всем спасибо. Руслану в особенности. Руслан, thank you very much for offering.
Георг.
До свидания. До свидания.
До свидания, всем спасибо.
Спасибо, Володя.
До свидания. Спасибо большое.
Спасибо.